This is That One Audition with Alyshia Ochse.
Hey writers, what are your New Year's goals? Forget hitting the gym or dry January. How about writing a brand new TV pilot? Hi, I'm Tanya Bhattacharya. I'm a working writer, co-executive producer who's written on over a dozen shows, including Bel Air, A Million Little Things, and Ginny and Georgia. And I'm also the founder of TV and feature film writing school Script Anatomy. I am super excited to bring back Script Anatomy's Pilot Palooza 30-day TV writing challenge in 2025, starting January 1st. With the challenge, you'll develop and write a new pilot in 30 days with me as your guide. Each day, you'll get lessons, tips, tools, and assignments to help build your story from concept through development, outline, and draft. We'll cover all the fundamental building blocks necessary to write a kick-ass script. And we'll use specific shows as examples so you can see how what you're learning applies and is illustrated in every single pilot. You'll also be able to connect with other writers on a private forum. Then on day 31, we'll celebrate your accomplishments together on a live Zoom. What are you waiting for? If you're ready to commit to your writing dreams, then you'll find this fun and motivating. And you'll start the year with a new sample by February 1st. All of this for just $175. That's less than a fancy coffee a day. So why don't you check out pilotpalooza.com for details and sign up?
Every time that I get to study a new actor, I try to find a different way in, or I find something in their career where I'm like, hold on a second. How did that happen? Because you've had over a 30 plus year career. You've been doing this for
a long time. Yeah.
A long time. You work in so many different mediums. I need to know, how does an actor all of a sudden wind up as a writer for Tyler Perry shows?
Oh God, that proves that God has a sense of humor, because yeah, people said, was this always your plan? I was like, not even close. It was how did it come about? It back in, good Lord, over 20 years ago now. I was at a point in my quote unquote career where I was playing a lot of day player parts and an inordinate amount of deputies, Klansmen, more deputies, cops. At one point, I thought I should get an honorary badge. And I was also doing it was the late 90s, early mid 90s. And there was a rash of these like Lifetime movies based on the murders of real people. So they'd get a TV star like Elizabeth Montgomery or Judith Light. And I looked at my resume and I had wife, mother, murderer with murder in mind, perfect murder. I was like,
you only got hired if it had murder in the title.
Yeah, I was just like, we're going to kill someone, and would you please arrest whoever they kill? And I was always Southern, even though I'm a Canadian. And I got to the point where I was it was just not really rewarding. I was working and paying bills, but I was like, it wasn't like, oh, I want to be on TV. It was like, I want to feel something. And so, to make a sort of long story short, one morning, I was waiting to get into this breakfast place in Atlanta, and it wasn't open yet. And there was, of all things, I think it was a Christian thrift store, which I don't know what makes a thrift store Christian. Maybe they're whoever the money went to. And I saw in the window, there's this little book, wasn't a Christian book, called Boy Dates Girl. And it was a book from 1948. It was a little, almost like a pamphlet almost, of dating and etiquette guide for teenagers from the late 40s and early 50s. And it was like, it cost me $0.25. And so I bought it and I was looking at it and it made me laugh out loud because it was written in this very corny kind of early 50s language, like, yikes, with 2 scoops and a cherry and you better zero in on. But it was like a Mr. Rogers on meth. It's very, because they were letters to this woman who wrote under a pseudonym and advice. Supposed, I don't know if they're real letters. But the thing about it that struck me was, even though it was written in this ridiculous kind of character language, very corny, but the advice was so good. It was genuinely really good values and about kindness and courtship, like how courtship can be really fun and dating and this. And I ended up creating a character called the Etiquette Man, who was a one-man. I did it was for a night of original work, and I did about 4 monologues. And then somebody approached me about making a short film, and I'd never done that. And he was going to direct it, but then after I wrote the screenplay, he said, "No, you should direct this." And I did everything wrong, because if you're going to do a short film, it should probably be around 10 minutes, because most festivals, I didn't do that. I made a 23-minute film. Cost me so much money, because I decided, if I'm going to do a short film, this is the year, 2000, and so video, there's no digital video then. It was betas. So I said, I want to make a movie, like widescreen, 35 millimeter. I didn't have any money. It wasn't like, oh, I had this savings. I had no savings. I was married at the time. And so I mortgaged our house. We actually had to borrow like $1,000 to reserve one of the locations. And we came out, and the movie ended up costing like $50,000 because I wanted to pay the crew, because I interviewed a lot of directors. This is a long answer to your question, but
no, I love this. I think it's good for people to see.
It was absolutely terrifying, because I had nothing to go by, and I interviewed a lot of directors who had made independent little films, and I just asked them, what went wrong? What would you wish you would have done? And one of the things I heard was, I wish I'd paid people, because a lot of people would get friends and crew, because I knew a lot of crew, because I'd been working in the business or whatever. But I knew that if something else came up, they would just go. And so I met individually with each possible crew member, and I said, what can I pay you that won't insult you, but that would also keep you from going and doing another job? Because I wanted them to feel valued. Because I met a lot of young directors and stuff who they had this passion project, and they expected everyone. And you've been on shoots, like the crew is not, I love this script. It's more, what's for lunch? It's a job. They do this all the time. So I did it. So I paid them. That's one of the reasons it cost so much. And I just kept finding sources of money and grants and things, because I wanted to just make a funny movie. It was, the movie Shane comes out of the mountains and visits his family and saves the town, and then rides back up into the mountains mysteriously. This character, he comes out of the mountains in a yellow Volkswagen Bug, saves this school, and goes back up into the hills. And no one knows where the hell he came from. He shocks the audience, the kids, they're like high schoolers, as well as the teachers, with this ridiculous advice, but it works. And what we found, that it was a Trojan horse, so it also had a message. I didn't write it with a message, except the message of, which I may talk about later, of making people feel seen. There's a couple moments where I had worked with addict kids and stuff, and I just had a couple moments where I think most of us need just to feel seen. We don't have to be famous. But just someone to go, how are you? Are you okay? Or, oh, that was really cool. That's the way the baby looks at their mom or dad, like, see what I did? But anyway, so long story short, it ended up doing really well. It was the most, I had stomach troubles from it, and we mortgaged our house and got about $60,000 in credit. All those stories you hear, and we did it. And I had an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, or 11-year-old and a 5-year-old. So it was terrifying. I was literally risking kind of everything, but I was never happier. I look back on that time, even when I was terrified, as just, I wouldn't trade it for anything, because it was this is very corny, but it wasn't like, I didn't do it like this will be my calling card, because I was like 23-minute short film. I wanted to do more things, but it was mainly, I just felt like I really want to do this, and I want to do it really well. And I want it to be funny, and I want to make people laugh, and I want to maybe change lives a little bit, just a little bit. And so it did that. It ended up, won a bunch of awards. It premiered at the Hamptons Festival, was invited to the National Gallery of Art. It was on cover of USA Today and the LA Times. It was really crazy. But the best screening, this is unrelated to Tyler Perry, the very best screening was, I never knew who had written this book, Boy Dates Girl, because I got the rights from Scholastic, because I wanted, again, one of the big things I learned from directors is they said, they have stepped on some people's toes. They said, just get your movie made. And it was like, especially because of this character, because he's genuinely good-hearted, really in that way, like a Mr. Rogers. I knew I couldn't do anything that was like, I wanted to make sure I got permits, and I rented an entire school. And I made sure everyone was paid the last day of shooting. I sat there and wrote checks out. So you're not going to wait for your money. And so one of the things I wanted to get the rights to this, even though I thought I probably don't have to. It's 40 years old. But I never knew who the author was because it was written under a pseudonym. And then I got a call. It had been out, and like I said, it got a lot of press and stuff. So I got this call one night from a woman in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I think I'd mentioned in the interview, I don't know who wrote this book. And she said, I know who wrote that book. She's one of my friends. She's turning 80, and her name is Ruth Lang Henriks. And she was a novelist in the 40s. She hung out in New York with Marlon Brando and Tennessee Williams. She wanted to be this, and she ended up getting married and moving back to Fort Wayne, but she kept writing and mentoring young writers. And it made sense because we did a special screening of it for her birthday in Fort Wayne to a packed theater. And we'd been in big theaters in LA and Washington, D.C., but that screening was the absolute, it's like everything came full circle. And it was fun to do something that you thought was impossible. And one day, I remember reading your story about seeing the question mark. I like to think of myself as a spiritual person, but I'm constantly going, where are you? And who are you? Are you a woman? Are you a lady? Are you a man with a beard? But at one point, and it's funny how we can forget little miracles. Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons I try to talk about this every 10 years or so. One night, it was back when you couldn't edit at home. So you had to rent Avid time. Very expensive. Well, it was very expensive. Like when we shot the movie, I had no more money. So I couldn't edit for 3 months. So I'm finally editing, and we could edit for 3 days in this 1 week. And I was out of money, and I thought it's going to be another couple of months. And I was feeling very sorry for myself, and my editor was sitting with me. And then I heard this voice in my head that said, it wasn't mean or judgmental. It just said, why have you forgotten my blessings? It was like a really gentle parent, a mom or a dad going, why are you sad? Things are really pretty good. And I turned to my friend and I said, did you hear that? She was like, what? And I wasn't incredibly exhausted or drugged or anything. So there's a lot of little magical things like that happened throughout the shoot that made it, it was such an adventure. So anyway, all that to say, I kept writing after that, and I bought the rights to this novel by the woman who had called me saying, I know who the author is. She was a poet in Fort Wayne, Indiana. She had this book about sort of these kids that formed their own halfway house. And I was trying to get that made, and I thought Tyler Perry would be, I knew he was in Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta. I thought, I'm going to try to get the script to him. But I kept trying to get it to producers in Los Angeles. And I happened to get a day role. I played a maitre d' in one of the Medea movies. And it wasn't like, oh, we love Steve Coulter. It was like, it went fine. And then this was about 6 months later. And a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, he's a big heavyset guy. And they didn't have it was to play a doorman in a scene with Idris Elba, who I didn't know was Idris Elba at the time because I hadn't seen The Wire yet. But they didn't have time to make the wardrobe, so they had to recast. They knew I was like average size, so I went to get fitted for the doorman. And the wardrobe supervisor was a guy I'd gone to school with. And normally I always talk on a fitting and stuff, but we talked a little more personally. So what have you been doing? So I wrote this script. It had won an award of all this in-kind money and I thought it helped getting investors. And I said, well, I'm trying to get it to Tyler. He goes, why don't you just drop it off upstairs? And I was like, oh, okay. And so what I did about a week later, I took the script, but I also took a copy of the Etiquette Man short and just dropped it off and forgot about it. A week later, Tyler and his producer just called me up, and I could hear the credit music of the short film in the background. They said, we just watched the movie. And they said, have you ever thought of writing for television? I went, no. And they said, would you
I love that
it?
Was an immediate no, absolutely.
Yeah, I was like that. No, not at all. And so they asked me to be on the staff. Which is crazy. And so for 2 years I was on the staff, and then which I didn't know about writers' rooms because I had this script, like I'd written my first script, and the producer had written on it, exceptional. And I was like, oh, so my head went, "Brr." But I didn't know that when you go in a writer's room, and they had 11 writers, they just basically tear your baby apart. And I was like, what are you doing? It's like you're taking your child and they're going off to kindergarten. They come back and they're wearing cowboy hats and a cape. It's like, what are they doing? And I did not care for that at all. And plus it was just, I did not care for that. And so then he fired everybody after 2 years, but kept me and one other guy, kept the Canadian white guy. And I thought it would just be like this temporary, but Tyler Perry, to his credit, is a total meritocracy. And he would do that for actors as other people. He would, like one day he just turned to me. I've been writing on the staff for about 3 months. We were watching a rehearsal and he goes, tomorrow after the read through, you take over, you direct the episode. And I was like, okay. I was like, and he would hand a football to you. Now, if you drop the football, you'd never get it again. But he would do that like for background actors. He'd like a certain person's tone or something. And so he'd give them a larger role. And if they ran with it, they'd be back again and again. And it was very fair. It wasn't not at all I'd hired a writer from Los Angeles. And their first day, they went down and we were shooting. And he was hanging by Video Village. And Tyler looked at him and said, what are you doing? Back up. The guy was trying to cozy up to him. It was like that didn't. So it was just because of that short film. Really,
that's amazing. I feel like that's the precipice of where a lot of actors are now, right? So we're in this self-taping era. So if you are an actor that's starting now and you're trying to quote unquote break in or start to get people to recognize you or see your work, you got to make your own content. But I think even in making your own content, a lot of people are doing it as a calling card. I did this 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I don't think you learn as an actor until you're on the other side, until you've actually tried to write something. Yeah. So you try to write something, you try to direct something. The best piece of advice I got when I was I wrote and directed my first short. I was like, can you please tell me what to do? Does anybody have any piece of advice? And somebody was like, you're going to fuck it up. So go fuck it up. And then you're going to learn from that. And
that's great advice.
But look at the bricks that were laid. So for you, and then you getting to go off on this part of storytelling. For me, when I look at your resume, like you were just saying, okay, I'm the cop here. I'm going to arrest you over here. To me, there was a transitional moment after writing for a couple years where all of a sudden it feels like your career or your job opportunities really diversify as far as the type of roles that you're playing. So I'm so curious after that time, what changed in your...
That's a really great question. I think it was because, first of all, you've done a hard thing, something that made you almost bleed out your eyeballs. And it's you may have felt this if you went, I'm sure if you went back to after you directed, when you went and acted, if it's not a good director, you're like, it was like being in the back of a car and someone's missing a bunch of exits and you want to go, shouldn't we? I think we should have gotten, okay. And then down the road, they're like, why are we lost? And you're like, because you didn't do the thing. Or you're not prepared. And the level of preparation that's necessary. And I found also as a writer, it helped my confidence in the because I'd done a hard thing and I'd done a joyful thing because I remember thinking, God, it sounds so corny, but it sounded like it didn't make sense. It was not practical. It's like I had 2 children who needed food. It's funny how they keep insisting they want to eat and be clothed. And I was risking all of that. And it's like doing your own work. So I think that gave me a confidence in that sense and also kind of a healthy impatience. I'm not going to do those cop roles anymore. And I'm not, because I remember I'd also heard about Billy Bob Thornton. He had done the short to Sling Blade, and then he did the feature and stuff. And so it helped in terms of an energy, in terms of confidence and a momentum. Let's really do this now. And having been, like you said, on other sides of it, it opens up your perspective. So you're not just, oh, please hire me. Please hire me. It's sort of, I've done this thing. And also as an actor, artistically, having written, I went through long, because I really didn't act very much for about 3 or 4 years while I was writing. I did a little bit on his shows and during hiatuses, and I learned so much about what draws an audience in and what makes a good story. And when you get down to the bare bones of it, just conflict is what is the conflict. And I would tell new writers, because when I had to hire a whole staff of my own. I didn't hire TV writers. I hired a female stand-up comic, a guy who wrote columns for barbershops, a woman who was a novelist, but they all were great. They knew story. And I said, I can teach you TV structure in 2 days. And they were original, interesting people, and not just, they weren't pulling from they weren't going, oh, this is from Everybody Loves Raymond, or this is from, I saw this, what rocks, Roseanne or something. So I think that you develop a perspective that helped my acting a lot in terms of getting right to the core of the scene and not, I remember thinking, oh God, when I was in my in my 20s and 30s, I'd be like, how can I make this interesting? And I remember, I think it was David Mamet who said, it's not your job to make it interesting. The story should be, that's the writer's job. And bring more of your soul to it and find out because it's all about every story. This woman's trying to do this, and the more impossible this is, the better it's going to draw us in. And so I think that's really helped. But the biggest thing was probably a certain confidence of having been out in the world with this movie, meeting a lot of people, and just not wanting to settle for waiting for the world to. And I'm a very shy person. I'm not a networker at all. Terrible networker.
Really? Your resume, I feel like, would beg to differ, because I think, or from an outsider's perspective, you're hired repeatedly by a lot of the same directors, a lot of the same producers. And to me, that is networking. But what I want to highlight for other actors, it's the work is the networking. You're not, work is the networking. Yeah. And that was my curiosity. I always ask people what's that one audition, but I have to ask about, there's a year like 2012, 2013. So just to catch the audience up, you stopped writing around 2010 on the Tyler Perry stuff, on television.
Yeah.
So about within 2 years, you are stepping into a totally different genre. And in 2013 alone, you have The Conjuring, Insidious, and Anchorman come out.
Oh, yeah.
I have to ask about any of those auditions. It's different roles for you. And look, you work for James Wan back to back. So I just worked for him earlier this year. So I was curious about your audition for either one of these pieces. The Conjuring, it was the first one. Insidious, it was the second one. So you could go and get a reference point of tone or certain things like that. But just those, I was curious about those auditions. If those aren't that interesting, but to me, it just all of a sudden, here comes we're still in the murder horror world. So you're just like adjacent from where you were earlier. But I was curious about those auditions.
Especially for The Conjuring was really interesting because it was a day of work, and they were shooting before Atlanta it was just starting to get more work. And I remember doing it, and part of it was I did decide to have more fun, to stop. One of the best acting notes I ever got, which it took years to sink in. I was doing a play in New York, and it was a role that had been written for me. And it was a great role, great funny play. And but I remember I was just working so hard. And this director who had known me from acting school said, "See, it's pretty good," but he said, "You're shitting grapefruits up there." And I was like, "What?" I went, "Oh." And then I went, "I am shitting grapefruits up there." I think I was shitting basketballs, actually. I wasn't having any fun. And I really, part of you're in your 20s and you think, I gotta make it. James Dean died when he was 24. And so part of it was a big of starting to have fun and enjoy the pretend of it, because there's a lot of craft, there's a lot of preparation. But you do all that so you can get that feeling, and you know that feeling of being this other person, having their words, their thoughts, whether they're mean or great or better than you or smarter than you or more selfish than you or whatever. And I think that translated into the other, because I remember enjoying the Conjuring audition. And it was, I'm trying to remember how, if it was on, I don't even, it's so long ago. But I do remember going to, the one thing, my daughter's an actor and a dialogue coach. And if any advice I gave her about the business, I said, do more than is asked of you and be kind. And that'll cover a lot. And it's not, because it's also when you do that preparation, not just for the sake, because there's some roles you don't really have to prepare. You just go, I know this. And I remember reading Stanislavski talked about it. He said, some roles you just read and go, you don't need to do any marking the script and now you just know it. And so I decided to have more fun with it. And I remember going, I didn't think, like in terms of networking, when I did that first film with James Wan, I just wanted to do the role, serve what the role was. Just do it, be attentive, be professional, and not have to do a bunch of takes. I'd always pride myself on that, unless the director does that. And I just remember enjoying myself and not trying to make more of it than it was. I put all, and that's a big thing. And I never even thought about it until about a little less than a year later. I got an email from James saying, I've got this role in Insidious 2. You want to do this? And I was like, and we hadn't I didn't write him a thank you card, or I used to do that in New York, all the casting directors. And I do that once in a while when it's a really good experience, because casting directors have a rotten job sometimes to see so many people. And some people have been very helpful, and I want to acknowledge that. But I hadn't kept in touch with him at all. I was like, James, wonderful experience. Hope to see you down there. I just did my job, and I think I did it well. And that way, if you've done that, then luck can come in, because we all depend on luck a lot. And I've had a lot of good luck. I've had a lot of bad luck, as we all have, and missed opportunities or things you thought would be something. But I do think I wasn't working as hard. I still needed the work. But I think I was having more fun. I definitely, with the Anchorman 2 audition, just a little thing, like impulses that I would have had before I started doing. I remember because I like to make light of stuff and not take myself or anything too seriously. And sometimes on sets before I wouldn't. And then I just started, like for when I did Insidious, it was one of the biggest roles I've had at that point. So it was I had scenes with Barbara Hershey, who I had admired as a young man. And then I started realizing I was starting to not have fun. And it was very fun. Here's a great direction. We were doing Insidious. We did some scenes in the morning, and we were doing wide shots, just sort of coverage, and went very well. And we had lunch. And we came back and we were doing close-ups. And I got sometimes as an actor, you're trying to recreate what you did instead of finding it again. Like in theaters, you have a great show Friday night. So Saturday night, instead of finding it again, you try to your brain's going, do what you did Friday. That'll work great. And then it falls flat. And I think I was trying to recreate whatever the heck I'd done in the morning. And it was just that feeling as an actor and James came up to me and he has this, I won't try to imitate him, but he has a British Australian accent. And he said, Steve, this morning, that was so good. Could you maybe try to do it like that? Instead of whatever the hell you're doing now. And I know what he said, because I wasn't having as much fun.
So how do you take that note? Because I think a lot of actors write into the show a lot, where it's like you get a note. Clearly, you're trying to do that already. Yeah. How do you digest that or shake it off?
The TV and film landscape, it's constantly changing, but traditional actor training has largely remained the same.
It's focused on a theater model whose main goal is to help you stretch the expression of your instrument. That's why you can have years of training,
from scene study classes to audition classes,
to even an MFA, and still not be able to book a 2-line co-star.
That's why we created The Bridge for Actors,
a collection of tech, craft, and business online courses to teach you the skills that you need to go from a student of acting
to a working actor.
Yeah, I think probably because I laughed about it. And I said what he wanted to say was stop doing this, do it the good way. I know the good way is just getting present again and just looking in the person's eyes and not trying to recreate, because I was recreating a performance from 3 hours before. And the camera would be like, you could just feel the camera sort of goes, nope. It has to be there. And you can feel that. And I hate when you can feel like, it's just not there. And so once I realized that, it was fine. And what's hard, I think sometimes for actors, is when you work with a director and they don't know what they want. And so you're like, okay, I brought you all these choices. And they'll just say, okay, let's just do it again. And yeah, let's just do it again. And you're like, okay, they know what they don't want. But the best directors I've had are, they know exactly what they want, and then they'll play around with that. But it'd be like getting in a car with someone and they're like, let's go eat. Where? I don't know. Let's just drive around until we see something we like. Yeah, we're going to be driving for 2 hours.
Trying to search around and find it. Okay, yeah. So I love that this anchor have more fun. So then here comes Anchorman 2. And I have to ask, at this whole time, are you still in Atlanta this whole time?
Yeah, whole time. And when I came down here, God, a long time ago, 89, 88, to do a play at the Alliance Theater. And with every intent to go back to New York. And it was a play. We did performances in Atlanta, but then we did a tour up the East Coast. So it weaned me away from New York. And back then, Atlanta had a big theater scene. It was very exciting. And I started to love acting again, too. That was another thing. Because New York, I'd gotten so driven, shitting all those grapefruits and all. I wasn't, and I rediscovered a sort of an enjoyment. And New York kind of was a lousy place to live in the 80s, too. But yeah, right after I did that short film, I almost moved to Los Angeles because I thought I was going to do more writing. And so as an actor now, you can live anywhere. You still need to be in Los Angeles if you're going to write. But I didn't. I stayed. And then the film incentive passed and I just kept staying. And I'd go and work in Los Angeles and people would say, where are you from, man? I'd say Atlanta. They go, Atlanta? Can you make a living there? And now if I'm out there, they go, who's your agent?
Times have changed.
Times have changed. But so I was in Atlanta though.
Because I was curious if your auditions were on tape. So was Anchorman on tape that you sent off?
And ironically, I take that in a hotel in Los Angeles. I was out shooting something and I had to send a tape in. And that's one of those examples. They had to hold up a headshot of myself. And I ended up talking to my headshot. It wasn't a planned bit. It just felt so ridiculous. So I was like, eh. Oh, and that reminds me of a terrible audition. Oh, I'll tell you about that.
We learn the most from our mistakes. I always say, I learned a lot from farting in my audition. I learned so much.
See, I can't believe you can't pull a fart back in.
No, you can't, especially when it happens again. I'll just let myself out now.
Oh, God. Oh, my God. Yeah, I forgot you said twice.
Yeah, you learn. I even tell my daughter, and I have a community of actors that I mentor, and we don't learn the most from a perfect audition. We actually learn the most by mistakes. And I have to say, the majority of the times that you get hired, it's when at least when you used to go in the room, it was when you made the mistakes and how you recovered usually is what got you the job.
Yeah. So, those happy little accidents that happen. Yeah.
So when you have a bombing audition, but wait, I want to finish.
Yes.
So what was the bit that you decided to just
because I said something like, because my picture did not look like me or something. All I did is I had glasses and I started talking about being a real chameleon and because it's just stupid. And usually you don't acknowledge what feels like slates or I hate slates. This is stupid. Does anyone look at him? And it was I guess it was the slate. And I ended up talking more. And I think that's probably what got me the role versus just whatever I did. And that was another one too, because I was in a hurry. And I've listened to your show, and a lot of actors, they got roles where they just didn't care. Either didn't care or there wasn't time to care the way they normally would, which is probably too much. And it also felt like that's me. If they don't hire that, that's fine. Because I hate when it's, especially if I could go back to my younger self, I would have said, use yourself more. You're, again, very corny, but you're enough. You're enough. You don't have to have this thing. You don't have to look like a model. I don't look, and I would try to. I remember I had these headshots when I first got to New York, and I looked like a model, but it wasn't me. People would be like, "This guy's very good looking. Who are you?" Because it was all airbrushed.
Yes, perfection, trying to sell perfection, and we're
and
not.
I was like, I did not look like that. I mean, I wished I did, but it was like, and I was, yeah, you're always thinking there's something. If I do this, if I have the right camera or the right lighting system, or so. And my self taping, I once had an agent, a friend of mine. She said, I remember she moved to, was it LA or? And she said, "Can you send me? Do you have any tapes of you jobs you got where technically was not good, where?" And some of my biggest jobs were like, I was thinking about this the other night. Once in a while, I almost always tape at home or in a hotel room. But a couple of times I've gone to a taping service. And this is nothing against taping services at all. But I remember thinking, God, that looks so good. But I cannot remember a job I got using a fancy pants. There's a couple I did to some guys in LA, which I wish I could remember their names. And they were great. They looked like some college roommates that had a little room with a background. But I have like just a wall that's gray, and I spend maybe $75 on lights. I use my phone. I have a nice microphone, but it ain't that. It's $30 or something. Mm-hmm. And this agent said, "Send me those tapes that you got jobs." Like I got this HBO job with Barry Levinson. I was in a house in Florida that had those peach colored walls. So I just looked pink, and there was nothing I could do. It looked like my face was pink, my clothes were pink, and I got the job. So
talent will always trump tech. But you can use tech. So, yeah. You can use tech to support your talent.
Yeah,
like now, especially you directing. Yeah, I think you can really make a meal knowing how to use your tech. But I don't think tech is ever going to stop talent from getting the job or the right person getting the job. Sometimes you fit the puzzle piece. They're looking for something, and you are it from the moment you come on screen. Whether you're pink or not, they're like him. I want him. You did something. So I always people when they stress out about tech, please put your craft and talent first. Make sure they can see you and they can hear you. And
you never know. Like listening, I love your voice. Now, some people, and it'd be like, it's just comforting to me. And I remember when I listened to some episodes, it was just whatever that to my ears and heart. It's just, that's a really comforting. Because some people have nice voices, but it's just the humanity of it, whatever. Thank you, Steve.
The humanness of them, whatever.
And so if that hits my ear, and that's someone I'd like to work with, and someone comes in that might even be, but it's just, you never know, or you may look like my best friend in college or whatever, or I may, or in another sense, you might remind me of someone I don't like. So there's so many things that are out of your control. But yeah, I do. I also believe that if you're really good, like I'm getting older now, and after all the actors, and I've taught and done workshops, and you start realizing that you could teach some people to be a better actor, but once in a while there's these people, and they don't come on very often. They really have that thing. They're just, because one thing I would tell actors is I would open with, I believe you have a talent. And I wasn't like blowing, because I've had also acting teachers, I'm sure you have too. They're like, "Oh, you're just so great. You're so great." And you're like, "I don't think I am right now." But we do have what we are better at. It's easy for us to pretend. We're pretty good at pretending we're someone else. Mm-hmm. And some people are just really gifted at it. That's why you look at Robert Downey Jr. or Margot Robbie, or people that just have that. It's not, they're not really handsome or really beautiful. They've got that thing, Paul Newman, people. It's just Gary Oldman.
And they're very comfortable. What it is to me is the full essence of comfort in themselves. Truly. Yeah. I think that's magnetic. Yeah. I think a lot of times people, I know you went to North Carolina School of Arts, right? So you were in an arts program. It's really interesting to me when the technical aspect or script analysis or theory comes in. Yeah. And then it's almost like we have to learn how to marry ourselves back to it. Whereas some of these people are not technically maybe skilled at the beginning, but they have that, they're comfortable in their skin and they bring themselves to it so effortlessly. And I think that's what we're all trying to go back to.
Because I did that in acting, where I remember, like when I first got out of acting school, I didn't want to take any classes, which I probably should have to stay in the flow of things in there. But I was so tired and so loaded up with stuff, and I'd gotten so far away from whatever brought me to it. You start going, I got to do this technique or that technique, and they were good tools. Yeah, but the tools were overriding just the talent to pretend and the joy, the biggest thing. Like I would go back again to my younger self and go, this is supposed to be joyful.
Fun. Yes.
It's not I still feel guilty when I'm doing a job and you're running around and missed or with a gun or something. And it's like, I am doing what I did when I was 11.
Right.
And now I'm a grown up, and you feel like, I hope no one finds out because this is not a job. But then again, I just did a play a few months ago. I did Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And that isn't just play and pretend. You're like, I prepared for a year to do that.
Yeah.
The joy of it, I think, is
the joy of it.
Thing.
Okay, because you brought it up, I have to bring it back. What was that terrible audition? I want to see what happened out of it.
It was a time. It was also the part of what's so hard as an actor, because they always say there's rejection, and of course there's rejection, but sometimes, and you develop a humility, which is, I think, healthy, and an empathy. But sometimes you're humiliated. And this was one of those times. And all I learned is that I'll never, I did learn something from this. As you were saying earlier, I was like, what the hell did I learn except life can be cruel? There was an audition before Atlanta was a production hub. You had to go, you drive to New Orleans, you drive to Wilmington, North Carolina, you drive to Shreveport, Louisiana. And this was in Alabama on a Saturday. And I remember my memory of it was a casting director I really liked. I forget her name. She's passed away since, but she was really, I liked her. She was a good egg, an older woman. And so I thought, I will do this. And they said, they'll tell you the role when you get there. And I was like, okay. If it had been someone else, I would have been like, okay. So I drive, I think it's 2.5 hours to get to Alabama. It's at a hotel. And I get in, and there's an 8-year-old and about a 12-year-old at the table and I went, it's a Saturday. She probably brought her grandchildren with her. That's sweet. No, they were running the front. They had the boxes of Peach's picture. They're checking people in. And this 12-year-old goes, your name? I was like, Steve Coulter. And I'm thinking, I hate my life. I hate my life so much. And he goes to his little 8-year-old brother. He goes, give him cop number 2. I was like, not even cop number 1. And it was like a mini nightmare of these children have taken over. And mind you, the grown-ups might have done the same thing. So I was like, okay, all right. I look at the roles. Actually, a nice roles. Okay, cop number 2. I'd done a lot of those in the early years. And so then I go in, and this is the thing I hate. You're supposed to write your name and your height on a piece of paper. I think I had to write agency. And it's just, you always feel like you've been arrested for drunk driving. But she wanted you to tape it to the wall behind you. So I was like, okay, that's artificial. That's going to be... Ugh. So I go to tape it, and it falls down on the ground. And and I pick it up without really looking. I tape it back, and I realize I've picked up a dead cockroach and taped it with my name to the wall. Oh, and I was like, this is just getting better and better. And then she goes, leave it.
So there's just a dead cockroach in the background,
right behind my head with my name on it, with guts stinging, and then I'd have to drive 2 hours back. I stopped driving out of state for auditions after that. I just thought,
it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
I remember at one point I thought, if I lived in New York still, that'd be like driving to Montreal for an audition. I wouldn't drive to Montreal for an audition. And you just start and also the power of no. One time I said no to a role, not out of any arrogance, and they literally practically threw money at me, going, what would it take for you to do this? And I learned about the power of no. And if you didn't really want to do it, because part of it, when we die, it's not going to be like, oh, I did that movie with so-and-so. I was with Denzel Washington. That's cool. But it was like,
yes,
did you make people
Flight's pretty cool.
alive?
Yeah.
You want to have, and I'm very ambitious. I want to do big things and stuff, but I also know that at the same time, who really cares if you're on television? Or in the movie.
Yes, true. Which goes back to the point of having fun and where you can put those boundaries in so you can have fun. So you're not fucking driving to Montreal to have fun. That doesn't sound like fun. You don't have to.
No, it's just humiliating.
That's a no.
And it's like, yeah. And
Having
it sounds, and part of it is auditions. Like, I actually like, most of the time, I still audition. I like when I don't have to. That's very nice. But when I do audition, I feel bad if I haven't enjoyed it. Because if I've said I'm going to audition for it, that means I would like to do the role. I've maybe once done a movie for money. I can say, even though I've really needed it at times in the past, we all like money, but I want to enjoy it. And that's one of the things, parenthetically, when they see now the instructions, they say, you don't have to memorize it. You can just, it's like, why not? Because first of all, you're not going to be as good. That's the main skill of one of the main crafty things of what we do.
Right.
And there's been times where I barely know it. I know, and that feels awful because then you just feel like I'm flying by the seat of my pants. So I don't understand that kind of aspect of it. It's almost like, don't do any hard work. We don't want you to be uncomfortable. I'm sorry we gave you 9 pages.
It's union rules, so they can not have to be in violation or pay us, essentially. It's a way that. Well, speaking of that, and there's one specific, if you can't think of one, there's one audition that I do want to ask about. I'd love to hear your audition process. Like, obviously you read it and you like memorizing, but you can pick anyone out, or I can cue you up with one where I'm very curious about. Brockmire. Your role in Brockmire was so fun and so different from anything that you did that I was like, what was the audition for this? And what did he do in that audition? What did it call for?
I remember I didn't have, because in the show I had to wear ladies' panties in downtown in July. Did not have to do that. But I remember part of it is that old thing of, if you're playing he's not a bad guy, but he's perverted. He has some obsessions and stuff. But I thought, he's not a bad guy. And it was like, I get to do this, not for money yet. But part of that is it's just getting handed this fun thing without any judgment.
I wanted to know is like, how do you craft your idea or your character, your script analysis? When you got Brockmire and you hit on one thing, I think a lot of people step into judgment versus justification. And I love that just in just this one quick moment, you were like, always justified why he acts like this.
No, you do, because they're like, and I remember hearing, who was it, like Alan Rickman talking about it. He said, I'm just a guy, this is what I like to do. It happens to bother a lot of other people. Even, I remember the examples of, what a great example is Ralph Fiennes in Schindler's List. He talked about, there's an awful scene where he goes out in the morning with a cigarette and his coffee, and he shoots a child in the concentration camp. And to him, he said, it was a challenge. I'm having a great cup of coffee. I've got a cigarette, beautiful morning. And this will be a challenge. And we stand out and go, oh my God, but you just have to find us. And the same thing with people who have less than appealing beliefs or things. And as an actor, you get to do that. You get to have a lack of character. You get to be smarter than you are. You get to be, I love getting to play someone who's much slower than me. I'm not that smart, so it's not that hard. But when you do that, where you just see life a little simpler, or you get to say completely politically incorrect things, and you get that permission, and to give yourself that permission. And one thing, a big thing I learned, because in my first 10 years of being an actor, I believed it all came from your imagination. I didn't put my soul into it. I thought, maybe because I came from this rigorous theater training, and it was all about transforming. And there's a certain thing to be said for that. I think it's cool when you can change sort of your soul a little bit. But it was a teacher. I can't remember where it was, but he wasn't actually a very good teacher. But this was really great. I was doing a monologue that I'd done a lot. And he said, use you, because I used to write these long biographies. Oh boy, that was useless. I forget who said you can't act that shit. And so I did it, and it wasn't like I had a direct personal connection, but I just made a small personal connection, and I was amazed that opened up. It literally felt like Technicolor versus black and white. All of a sudden I felt present and here and driven. And I did, because I was always pretty good at recreating reality. I mean, people say, oh, you're so naturalistic. But it still was like a performance. And I would, if I did a play, I'd go through the entire play before the play. And now it's like not trusting the work. And after this, I started just putting my soul into it. And then you have much more unpredictable responses to things because we're unpredictable. We're not logical. We're not, and you surprise yourself. But it, again, it goes back to, oh, that's more fun. And you find yourself doing things you didn't plan, which is
yes. Cool. I love this. Is there a way that you can tangibly describe how you're putting your soul into things? Because clearly you have a technical, you've got tools from the background. It's almost hard. I was just teaching right before this, and somebody literally said, I'm doing it right. So why is it not connecting with people? And I said, because you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Nobody
and
connects
no one's judging. And teachers will like that. They'll go, oh, yes, you did what I asked you to do. But I found when I read a script, and I read it a lot, I try to pay real close attention to where it really, something goes bing to me. And it may be just one line. And usually if that, because sometimes I have to read it and you go, I just know what that is. And even though it's not, even if it's, I used to think it has to match. I have to have had an experience like that. It's like, no, it just has to be, trust your little gut. When you were 8 years old, they could read you the same story every night. And you could play the same game over and over again because each time it's new to you. And I started trusting that magic goo in my head and see where I connected with it. Because often, like so many, I did a role on Atlanta that was described as this big hulking mountain man. And I went, I'm not a big hulking mountain, a lanky Canadian man. But I knew that this guy, I thought he's a good guy who just doesn't have any. And I knew that feeling of like, why are you bothering me with this nonsense? And I was just like, and here's an opportunity. I get to express that without pussyfooting around. I'm going to get to do that in several scenes with one of my favorite actors. And so I when I read the script, I really try to look for where does it get me. So I try not to, it's like a present, you want to open it right away. If you get an audition, I want to make sure it doesn't have to be a hollowed hall, but I want to have some quiet where so I get those first little signals right away because you might not get it again. Yeah. And then read it many, remember Anthony Hopkins talking about just read it over and over because each time little things, you thought there was a comma there. And as a writer, you learn, you don't accidentally put a comma, or if there's a ellipses, there's a little pause to wait to say the line. Because I remember I've learned, this is a big lesson I learned. It was at a cold reading one time. So you were just reading the script. It was new work. And I was just flying by the seat of my pants. And I read my lines and everyone burst out laughing. And this guy next to me went, man, you're so funny. And I was like, I didn't even know I had to go back. Once they'd gotten past that scene, I went back and went, oh, I just read what the writer had written. It said, pause, talks, takes a beat. I did what I think she said, the writer. And obviously some of you craft comedy stuff, but that was an example of just doing what the writer wrote without adding anything to it. I learned that this was real. And the simplicity that I work less hard now than I did, or more efficiently than when I was younger. Because you realize you don't have to, I don't know where the character came from. Yeah, he did just get out of a car. I know what that feels like. I don't have to go, what kind of car was it? And who was my mother? If it's not relevant to the story, if it has a certain dialect, that's very relevant. Or if he's from northern Alabama versus middle Georgia or Vermont or whatever. But other than that, it's see where it tickles you.
I love that. It's really helpful. That's so helpful. Because you just said you work less now that you're older. My last question, for something like Oppenheimer that comes across your desk, that feels like it could be pressuresome to, okay, I really want to be a part of telling the story. It's a time period. There's so much to be added to this. How did you effortlessly approach this audition? I'm curious about this one.
It's a thing I don't want to lose. is, and it's the same thing I felt when I was on set. I'm very excited as a Christopher Nolan, because Brittany even said it's only a day, and I said Gary Oldman's doing just a day. I'll do a day on a Christopher Nolan. So in the back of your head is Christopher Nolan. But then you go, but I have these words that will keep me from being distracted. They gave you dummy sides because they didn't want to release the script, and it was a scientist, so I dove into making sure I knew exactly what I was talking about. I saw that what they're looking for is someone to show their confident authority. So I went, I love when you get to do confident authority, because then I don't have to be nervous, because
that doesn't work.
But also behind it, I was like, I hope they believe me, which is what someone in that position of responsibility would still be thinking. Boy, I've done a lot of training and education, and I have a doctorate or whatever that character has, but maybe they still might not believe it. So that kind of vulnerability. So again, is putting myself into it. But then on set, I'm still very professional. The same thing when I work with, I'm going to drop names here, but Denzel Washington and Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. On the outside, I was like, yeah, got my lines, play with the role, this and that. But inside, I'm like, this is Al Pacino. I said Dog Day Afternoon. I drew the poster on my wall at Dog Day Afternoon. So the same thing when I'm on set with Cillian Murphy. There's Matt Damon. I've just loved his work. And there's Christopher Nolan with his sport coat and Boy, Is It Ever Dirty. And you just want to pinch yourself. And you're not like, yeah, this is what I do. You're behaving professionally and doing your job. But a very quick anecdote. In the morning for that, it was just one day of shooting. In the morning, we shot all the 2 shots this time. And 3 shots, because there's 6 of us in this room. And then we went to lunch, we came back, and then we're going to do close-ups. We're literally going to go around clockwise and do everyone's close-ups. And Matt Damon told this story. I never met him before. It was not like, yeah, my pal Matt. But he told a story of how when he was starting out, Ben Affleck had more experience than he, and he was giving Matt some advice saying, try not to do your close-ups after lunch because all your blood sugar is down in your stomach, and your brain was like, so no sooner he said that, he starts, and he had been word perfect, and all of a sudden he starts messing up his line. So he messed up his line. Then the guy playing the Secretary of War he messed up his line. And Cillian Murphy, who had been absolutely word perfect, he flubs his lines. So then it gets to me, and I just went, I hope I don't go Damon. And and I did 3 or 4 takes and nailed it. And then Matthew Modine was next to me, and I went, Matthew, don't go Damon on me. So then when I said goodbye to Matt, I said, he laughed. And then I said, it's true, you shouldn't meet your heroes.
Steve, I'm so glad we ended on that anecdote, because that brings us back to James Wan earlier, when it was like, can you do what you did earlier and not what's happening right here? And look, we've come full circle. You're after lunch. You've already done that thing where you're like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I'm going to have fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's nothing wrong with being competitive too. I was like, if Cillian Murphy fucks up, I am not fucking up. I can be more. And I was like the one guy that didn't fuck up. So.
Steve, this was a joy. What I know you said earlier about affecting people, it's wonderful to go through a career, like a whole bucket of good characters. You are the ultimate working actor. So thanks for letting me pick in there and sharing
thanks
some
for
goodness.
having me.
This was such a joy, truly, from start to finish. I'm glad you did that.
Vice versa.
I'm so glad you did that short. I think it changed everything. I truly do.
I think it did. Actually, it's funny. I actually never really thought about before and after. You think I would have, but it really did. I always thought it led to some stuff that I didn't anticipate, but it really did. I was letting things come to me. And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm not going to just let things come to me anymore. And I don't think I have since then. So
no,
maybe you made me learn something. So
I love that. Steve, I don't know if you're on the socials. It's great if you're not, but is there anything you can let people can go watch the last 30 years of great stuff?
One thing, I'm not really good at plugging things, but I really want to plug this actually. At the end of October, there's a movie called Hangdog coming out. We shot it with a crew of 20 people. Matt Casella and Jen Cordry, this wonderful couple in Maine. We shot it in an island in Maine. Stars Desmond Borges, who you've seen him on Only Murders in the Building, And we did Shotgun Wedding together. And it's a wonderful, hilarious, sweet movie called Hangdog. Will be on Apple TV and Amazon October 28th. Look for it. It really is. And I don't plug stuff that if it's not any good, I wouldn't believe me. I wouldn't talk about it. But it's a delight, especially if you've ever had a dog. It's not like an old Yeller movie. It's about relationships and what do you do with your life when you don't know what to do. But it's a really well-made first film from these filmmakers, and it looks like they've been making movies for a long time. And Desmond is amazing. I play his friend. So, yeah.
I'm glad you plugged it. Thank you. We'll make sure to put that in the notes. Steve, such a pleasure. I can't wait till we're on set together.
Yes, that would be fun. So I hope our paths cross.
They will for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Enjoy your wife's birthday. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.